The morning air at Arlington National Cemetery carried the weight
Sir,
of
you
reverence,
cannot
but
enter.
also the sharp sting of arrogance. At the grand gates, two young guards stood like stone-polished boots gleaming, eyes hard with suspicion. Before them stood an old man, John Miller, 87 years of age, his back bent but unbroken, his face carved with the lines of decades past. He wore a plain, threadbare suit, the kind of attire that drew little respect in a place of medals and ceremony. Yet behind his quiet presence lived a storm, a history unseen. The guards didn't see it. To them he was just an intruder. "Sir, this is a private funeral for General Wallace. Invitation only." The words cut like a blade meant to wound his dignity. The younger one leaned in closer, dismissing the old man with a smirk. "Move along, Grandpa, you don't belong here." The crowd arriving in sleek black sedans whispered, eyes darting between pity and irritation. They saw only frailty, not the living testament of sacrifice standing in front of them. But John Miller didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered from the green hills dotted with flags at half-mast. When he finally spoke, his words were calm, steady, carrying a weight far heavier than the guards could grasp. "I'm here for the general. He would have wanted me here." With that simple declaration, a battle between arrogance and truth quietly ignited, one that would soon shake every person present to their core. The guards pressed harder, mistaking silence for weakness. The lieutenant in charge, barely out of his 20s, stepped forward with an air of authority he hadn't earned. "Sir, you are disrupting a state funeral. Leave immediately or be arrested." The arrogance was thick in his voice, each word dripping with the confidence of a man who had never tasted real combat, who thought command could be practiced in front of a mirror. John's patience, vast as it was, began to run thin. "I'm not leaving," he said. The words landed with finality, a quiet defiance that unsettled even the younger soldiers. But when their eyes drifted to the crooked, tarnished pin on John's lapel, their dismissal only deepened. One guard flicked it with his finger, sneering, "What's this supposed to be? A prize from a Cracker Jack box?" And that's when the world around John shifted. In a heartbeat, the manicured lawns of Arlington gave way to the sucking mud of a jungle long ago, the air thick with smoke, blood, and desperation. A younger General Wallace lay trapped beneath a fallen tree, his life hanging by a thread, pressing a jagged piece of shrapnel into John's hand. "Keep this," he rasped. "It means you were there. It means you saved us." When the vision faded, John's voice returned low, dangerous. "Don't touch that." The crowd gasped as the guards laid hands on him, unknowingly humiliating a man whose history eclipsed them all. But among the mourners, one set of eyes saw the truth, a young Captain Hayes. He recognized that quiet strength, the stillness only real combat veterans carried. Hayes knew this wasn't just some old man. This was someone the military itself had forgotten. Captain Hayes moved swiftly, heart-pounding. He couldn't intervene publicly without risking his career, but he knew who to call. Stepping away, he dialed Colonel Markinson, Wallace's right-hand man for 20 years. "Sir, there's an incident at the gate. An old man named John Miller. He's wearing a tarnished pin. It looks like shrapnel." For a moment, there was only silence on the other end, heavy and electric. Then Markinson's voice, stripped of calm, roared urgency. "Did you say John Miller?" Within seconds, the colonel abandoned his post, radioing General Peters himself. "We have a code, Shepard," he barked. The words froze the command tent. Shepard. A battlefield legend whispered among soldiers, a ghost story of a man who walked into impossible missions and brought his brothers home. General Peters didn't hesitate. "Halt everything! I'm on my way." Back at the gate, the lieutenant was savoring his little victory, ordering the frail intruder dragged away. His arrogance climaxed with one final insult, sneering that Miller would spend the funeral in a holding cell, a delusional old man locked away while real heroes were honored. But fate was already in motion. A low rumble grew on the horizon, tires spitting gravel as a motorcade of Suburbans came tearing over the hill. They didn't arrive with the solemn grace of a funeral procession. They came like a storm. The Suburbans screeched to a halt, doors flying open in perfect precision. Out stepped officers of the highest caliber, sergeants, colonels, men whose uniforms carried so many medals they chimed with each step. And then came General Peters, a four-star giant whose presence silenced the very wind. The lieutenant snapped to attention, hands trembling as the realization sank in that his petty display of authority had been witnessed by the most powerful man in uniform. Yet Peters didn't look at him, not even once. His eyes cut through the chaos, locking only on John Miller, and in that moment everything shifted. The general's hardened aura dissolved, replaced by reverence. He marched forward with deliberate steps, stopping just 3 feet from the frail old man. Then before the stunned crowd, General Peters raised his hand in the sharpest salute of his career. "Mr. Miller," his command voice thundered, "it is an honor, sir." Gasps rippled through the gathering as whispers of a name began to spread. The shepherd, a ghost no one believed still walked among them. The young lieutenant staggered back, paling as Peters declared, "He has more right to be here than any of us." Soldiers began saluting one by one, a ripple of respect rising until the entire cemetery seemed to stand in tribute to the man the world had nearly turned away. The tide of humiliation swung, and the guards realized too late they had tried to cast out a giant. General Peters' booming voice carried across the cemetery, turning the moment into history. "For those who do not know, you are looking at John Miller, known in whispers as the Shepherd. He was no ordinary soldier. He was a medic, a pilot, a warrior who refused medals, who carried men out of hell itself so they could live to see home again. He saved Captain Wallace in 1968, carrying half a unit on his back through jungles thick with death." As the general spoke, all eyes turned to the crooked pin on John's lapel. "That piece of shrapnel," Peters continued, his voice low but cutting like steel, "was forged into the only medal of shepherds ever made. Wallace gave it to Miller himself, saying it meant more than any medal minted by man. And you," he snapped at the lieutenant, "dared to flick it like trash." The young officer's knees nearly buckled as he realized he had mocked the highest honor ever bestowed on a battlefield. One by one, soldiers saluted, their eyes burning with awe. What began as whispers of ridicule turned into gasps of revelation. The crowd saw not an old man, but the embodiment of sacrifice itself. And for the first time that day, John Miller's silence wasn't mistaken for weakness. It was seen for what it truly was, the weight of a man who had already given everything. General Peters turned his glare on the lieutenant and his men. "You demanded his invitation. Every headstone here is his invitation. You wanted medals. His scars are medals written on his very skin. You looked at history itself and saw nothing but a nuisance. That failure is yours, and you will answer for it." The young men stammered apologies, but before Peters could mete out judgment, John himself intervened. His weathered hand rested on the general's arm. "Michael," he said softly, calling the four-star by his first name, "they're just kids. They were doing what they thought was right. Let it be." Then he turned to the lieutenant, his eyes not angry but steady with wisdom. "Son, respect isn't given by the uniform you wear. It's earned by how you treat people. And sometimes the greatest heroes walk without rank, without medals, invisible to men like you. Remember that." His words cut deeper than any punishment, leaving the young man shaken to his core. As silence hung, a memory bloomed. The night Wallace had pressed the shrapnel into John's hand. "They'll give me a silver star for this," Wallace had said, "but it belongs to you." It wasn't just a pin, it was proof of sacrifice, a debt no nation could repay. General Peters personally escorted John through the gates, past the rows of saluting soldiers, seating him not at the back, but in the front row among Wallace's grieving family. Tears filled their eyes as they embraced him. To them, the shepherd wasn't a myth. He was the reason they'd had 50 more years with their father, their grandfather, their general. The funeral continued, but the lesson of the gate lingered, echoing louder than the ceremony itself. Peters didn't let the incident vanish. He ordered the guards retrained under a new standard, the Miller Protocol. Every recruit would now learn not just security, but humility, empathy, and awareness of the unseen sacrifices made by those who bore no visible honors. Across the military, John Miller's name became legend anew, no longer just a whispered tale, but a living example of valor without vanity. And yet, for John himself, there was no celebration. He sat quietly, paying final respects to a friend he had carried through fire, his duty at last fulfilled. Months later, fate offered one last chapter. The young lieutenant, humbled and reassigned, sat in a small diner on a rainy afternoon. The door opened, and in walked John Miller, ordering nothing more than a cup of coffee. For a long moment, the lieutenant sat frozen, shame and gratitude battling within. Finally, he rose, placed a $10 bill by John's cup, and said quietly, "For the coffee, sir, and for the lesson, thank you." John looked at him, saw the change, and offered a small smile. "Stay safe, son," and that was all. No medals, no salutes, just a quiet understanding passed between two men. Heroes like John Miller don't live in statues or textbooks. They walk among us unrecognized, carrying burdens we'll never see. And sometimes their greatest lesson is not in battle, but in humility. If this story moved you, don't let it fade. Share it, honor it, and remember that true valor doesn't always wear a uniform. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more untold stories of hidden heroes, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that greatness can walk in silence right beside us. Because sometimes, the quietest man in the room is the one who gave the most.